Hello and welcome to Basic Arithmetic Without a Calculator. I'm Elizabeth Johnson and this is Lesson 11, Percentage of a Quantity. In this lesson we're going to explore how to turn word sentences into number sentence and then how to solve it. So to begin with, we have this word sentence which says, what is 5% of 80? Now to solve a problem like this, the first thing we'll do is we'll begin to identify all the numbers in that sentence. So we've got 5 and we've got 80, but hidden in here is also the percent, which means out of 100. So that is also a numeric value. The second step now is going to be how to turn all of these numeric values into a sentence of some sort. And so let's see what we've got. 5% can be written as either a 5 with a percent symbol next to it, or the easier way to work with it would be to say 5 over 100, especially with the newer calculators that don't have the percent buttons. Now, of 80, what do we do with that? Well, the 80 is easy enough. We know it's going to go in here somewhere. But of, what do we do with that? Well, let's start by looking at this rule, and if you need to stop the video to write it down, it might help you to remember it in the future. You can replace the word of with the word times. In other words, if you see of, it means you have to multiply. So I'm going to put a multiplication symbol in here now, and we've just completed the second part of the job. We saw the word sentence, we turned it into number sentence, and now the third part of that job is going to be to solve it. Well, there's a couple of ways I know of to solve this, and the first one would be to turn this fraction into a decimal by dividing the bottom number into the top number and then multiplying it times 80. But another way to do it would be to turn the whole number into a fraction and then multiply them. And since we've been doing a lot of work with multiplication of fractions, I'd like to reinforce that learning now and turn this 80 into a fraction. And how do I do it? Well, simply anytime you want to turn a fraction, or a whole number into a fraction rather, you would take that and put it on top of the number 1. And there you have an instant fraction. So now remember, with multiplication, you simply multiply the tops times the bottom, and there's your answer. But I'm going to teach you a new skill which is called cancellation, because it makes your multiplication so much easier, and you only get to do it when you're using fractions and when you're using multiplication division of fractions. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at diagonals here. We're going to look at the top left-hand number, the bottom right-hand. You're going to look at the bottom left and the top right. And if there is any number that can be evenly divided into those two, you can do it, and that therefore reduce the numbers and make your multiplication a lot easier. So looking at these diagonals, the 5 and the 1, well, the only thing that can be evenly divided into both of them without a remainder is the number 1, and that's not going to help us. But here, I can see another way of canceling down. There is a number that can be divided into both the top and the bottom, and that number is 20. So I'm going to divide the 80 by 20, and that's going to give me 4. I'm going to divide the 100 by 20, and that's going to give us 5. So now I can do that multiplication, and it's going to be a bit easier. 5 times 4 is simply 20. And 5 times 1 is 5. So now we have it, our answer. But unfortunately, it says an improper fraction, so we'll have to correct that. And you'll probably remember that to do that, you divide the 5 up into the 20, and that's going to give you 4. So there's my answer, 4. Now let's have a look at another kind of number sentence involving percentages. In this case, we've got the percentage that is missing. Now if you want to solve a problem like this, you're going to have to do it differently. First of all, of course, we're going to identify our numbers. We've got a percent, we've got a 4, and we've got a 3. But to decide what to do with them, I've got another rule for you, and really, you should write this down so you can remember it. You've got is over of times 100 equals your percentage. So that's how you get a percentage. And I know it looks strange to see the words like is and of in a fraction, but there's a good reason for it, and I'll just explain that to you now. The word is always going to be associated with some kind of a number. In this case, is referring to the number 3. The word of is referring to the number 4. So what you do is you take whatever number these words are talking about and you put them into a fraction. So in this case, you've got the number 3 over the number 4 is on top of, and that gives you 3/4. And now we've got your percentage. So let's follow the rest of this formula. You've got times 100 equals. And again, let's reinforce our multiplication skills here because we have just learned how to multiply fractions and it's good practice to continue doing it. So I've got 3/4 times 100 and I am starting to turn that 100 into a fraction here by putting it on top of the number 1. And then I'm going to see if there's any canceling to do. Well, these diagonals are as small as they're going to get because I've got a 3 and a 1. The only number that can be evenly divided into them is 1, and that's not going to change anything. But in this case, I've got a 4 and 100. They can both be divided by 4. 100 divided by 4 is 25. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Now I'm going to do the multiplication. 3 groups of 25 is 75. And 1 lot of 1 is 1. So again, I'm going to solve this improper fraction by dividing the 1 up into the 75, and I get 75. So what this is telling me is that my missing percentage is actually 75. And so to answer this question, 75% of 4 is 3. And so now let's look at another one that's similar to that. What percent of 10 is the number 5? And again, we don't have a percentage, so we're going to use this formula again. Is over of times 100 gives you your percentage. We've got of 10 here, so 10 is associated with the word of. We've got is 5. Oops. So we're going to associate 5 with the word is. So what that means is that you have got 5 over 10 times 100. And that's going to give you your missing percentage. So again, let's turn this second fraction, a second number, into a fraction. And then we can do our multiplication. Now to begin with, I'm going to divide both this and this by 10. And that gives me 10 at the top and 1 at the bottom. Did you see how I just knocked the zeros off? If I had 2 zeros on both, I could knock both of those zeros off. And it's the same thing as dividing them both by 10. So in fact, I've just canceled down those 2 diagonals. Now I've got 5 times 10, which is 50. And that's on top of 1 times 1, which is 1. And when I go to fix that improper fraction, I divide the 1 into the 50, and that gives me 50. So to answer this question, and we were able to estimate this before we started, what percent of 10 is the number 5? 5 is 50% of 10. And so that concludes our section about how to find a percentage of a quantity. I hope you'll enjoy doing your exercises, and I'll see you back again in the next video.